As I said, this is my third cup of coffee, so cheers to you. If you want to get a beverage, go ahead and get your beverage. And the other thing is we're recording this just so that way folks who can't make it have access to it. However, I also know that not everybody necessarily wants to raise their hand or ask a question when it's being recorded. So after we're all done today, I'll hang around for a little while longer and you can ask a question once we kill the recording. So I have got some ideas to share with you that I hope will ultimately make your life easier. More tools to be able to pull from, whether it's a challenging conversation with your boss, Paul, as though you're not here, or Mr. Beltman, or parents or kids or each other, or maybe a spouse, maybe a former spouse, maybe a committee that you volunteer on, maybe just walking down the street and someone who you come into contact with might be working a mood. So I recognize that some of the tips and language might really resonate with you more than others. Perfectly okay. If this is just reiterating and reminding you of stuff that you already know, but maybe don't implement, great. Then it's just coming to the top of mind. And I recognize that since the dawn of time, I'm gonna do a movie reference here, 2001: A Space Odyssey, boom, 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 boom. Never has actually saying calm down helped anyone actually calm down. Not terribly surprising, but still, we start using these words and phrases like, just gonna take a minute here because my husband uses that slow down all the time. And frankly, it drives me nuts. I'm thinking like, we're not going fast here. And he's like, slow down, slow down. Ah. Or the, hey, don't worry about it. Or the very potentially overly optimistic, everything's going to work out. Or the completely aggravating, don't be so emotional. Or what I've heard from some clients, you just aren't being logical. And when I used to practice law, sometimes we'd say, well, it is what it is. Or the, yeah, but, or what might be surprising to you, what can I do for you? Now, I asked my assistant, Patty, like, are there any others that you would add to the list? And she's like, oh yeah, just get over it. And that, as much as just slow down, it would just really gets under my skin and makes me so aggravated. The get over it is her big minimizers. So I want to pause for a moment and just say, some of these might work in certain situations, but sometimes we use the same tool, but get very different results. So instead of trying to be able to calm people down, to be able to maybe kind of placate them, just kind of get out of the conversation as quickly as we can, rather than it helping, these people feel it as though it's minimizing. And what is it when I mean minimizing? I don't know how you experience those phrases. If you have used them before or had them used on you, you might have found that it kind of downplays or kind of denies your experience. What do you mean I'm being so emotional? Yes, it's important. What do you mean I'm not being logical? It makes perfectly logical sense to me. And all of those really ignore the emotional side of what people are expressing. And I think we are both thinking and feeling at entities at a kind of a molecular level that it's really hard just to be one or the other. And instead of actually helping or calming the situation, it really escalates. If like I'm not feeling heard and I'm feeling really kind of frustrated, it's going to get my back up and I might get really reactive. I might get really defensive, or I might get really offensive. The other thing is, I think it either completely destroys or erodes people's trust. And frankly, it really pisses people off sometime, and potentially that anger or that pissed offness or that upsetness or that disappointment or that just could potentially be directed at you. And if you're driving, the kids to and from school and you're in traffic, the last thing you want to be able to do is have to be able to deflect and defend against angry responses. It makes it your job, which is already challenging, of getting those kiddos to and from where they need to be safely and interacting with each other, productively, just a little bit more harder. And quite frankly, the job is hard enough that you don't really need the extra pieces. In fact, the interactions among people are some of the hardest parts of jobs. Several years back, I was working with the 911 call center folks, and these people are the ones who dispatch to emergencies. And they said, well, that's not the hard part of the job. The hard part of the job is dealing with my coworkers. Now, let that sink in a little bit. It's like, okay, the 911 isn't so hard. It's more the coworkers. And I think you might find something similar of it may not be the driving, it may be dealing with the kids or dealing with the parents or dealing with all of these other things. It's those other people and those interactions that can be escalated and frustrating that make it really difficult and draining. Can anyone give me like a little whoop whoop if that's the case, or a thumbs up? Okay, I'll just assume that that's because that no one's really doing that because we're on camera, but I gotcha. So what happens when we get escalated? I refer to it as the pinball machine. Hey, before I continue, I realized I forgot to mention something. At some point in each of your careers or in each one of your lives, you are going to be that trusted individual that someone comes to for advice. And if you say, Carol, I got this, or Carol, I don't think this is necessarily going to change, like some of the kind of baked in elements that are present in our job, that is fine. But know that at some point you are going to be the trusted friend or family that someone turns to. So maybe think about something that might resonate with you, that when they come to you, you can give them an additional tool where they feel a little bit more empowered and a little bit more calm in their lives. Back to the pinball machine. Now, I've got a question coming. How would you suggest dealing with a downright bully? Let's hang on to that. Paul, remind me to get back to that, and I'll circle back to that later on. And maybe, hopefully, during the time together, you'll have some tools or ideas to be able to address that. So I refer to kind of the escalate. Remember, I said you might get, angry, get an escalated response. I'm making an analogy to a pinball machine here. I will be making one. So I am just curious, has everybody actually had their hands on a actual pinball machine, not just a little, gaming type of remote? If you haven't, you can, in the next couple of days, head on down to downtown Tacoma, and you can go to Dorky's Arcade, which they've got a copy of the Addams Family, the Black Knight Sword of Rage, the Deadpool Pro Edition, Fishtails, Funhouse, and 23 other pinball machines to be able to look at. And if you're interested, you can go to pinball or map.com, and you can punch in any city anywhere in the US, and it will give you the closest pinball machine and arcades. So when I talk about stress in terms of this pinball machine. So what I think about is that when we're escalated, or when we have a stress, we have a stress response, not a stress choice. And we have physiological as well as thinking impacts on that. The cortisol and testosterone dump through our system, a little bit like that big lever being pulled back and hitting that pinball, and there are reactions, lights, buzzers, bells, bumpers, and it just goes. And we have a response. For a lot of people, it's going to be an increase in your heart rate. Our breathing gets really kind of shallow and up in our chest versus those big belly full kind of yoga breaths. Our blood pressure increases. Our blood flow gets diverted. If it's our fight response, it goes to our muscles in our arms to be able to throw punches. If it's our flight response, the blood goes down into our legs to get us the heck out of Dodge. Then there's also a little bit of a freeze response, which means that your brain is desperately trying to find some type of memory that is similar to this situation, so you can go on that memory as some direction of what to do. So let me ask you this. The last time you were feeling maybe that like there was a bully incident, or that people were being unreasonable, or that people were telling you to calm down, where did you feel that stress in your body? Like for me, I feel it in my gut. My stomach drops down. Sometimes even if I get embarrassed, my face gets flushed. Or if I get irritated, I can literally feel my back get up and I start standing a little bit bigger, like a big mama bear, to make myself a little bit bigger. So I'm just kind of asking you just a minute where you feel it. I'm going to pause for a moment, because I have heard stories where people have learned to disassociate what their body is feeling. I heard of a woman who actually had been walking around on a broken leg for months because she just learned to kind of deny, minimize, or not kind of associate what her body was feeling. If that's the case for you, I just want to honor the fact that people feel their bodies and experience their bodies differently. So it looks like some people are feeling their chest, wanted to yell at them all. Sometimes we feel deep anger. Yeah, anger is a big emotion. Okay. So those are biological responses of where you feel it in your body. Why do I ask you to do that? Because sometimes you may be feeling it before you're processing it. And sometimes those feelings are pretty stinking immediate. So those might be clues that you are feeling, escalated or threatened. What else? Well, I said body and brain. So when we are feeling escalated, if we're feeling really escalated or really threatened or really angry, our brain starts shutting off. We lose our short-term memory. We lose our ability to empathize with people, which is really kind of a building block on trust and respect and collaboration and cooperation. And also it impacts our ability to listen for what it is they're trying to express, what's underlying all of this anger and this pissed offness and this irritation or frustration. It really hard. We kind of stop thinking well, and we start kind of doing a lot more of selective listening. It impacts our ability to do problem solving. It impacts our ability to do kind of integrative thinking, bringing ideas from a lot of different places. It also hurts our ability to do kind of long-term strategic thinking of, if this, then that can happen after this, but wait, what's another option? If then this other, that, then this, then that. It's really hard. And it impacts our decision making. All of those things are called our executive function. The executive function part of the brain happens. And a lot of times what we think we want to do in the pinball machine is put our hands on those little flappers and try to save the ball. Hey, it's okay. Calm down. Don't be so emotional. This is no big deal. Everything's going to work out okay. Which, rather than kind of saving it, in pinball machines, that then thrust that ball back up to all the bells and whistles and bumpers, and the lights start going and the score starts going up and up and up. So it starts re-aggravating all of those stress responses, which then means our executive function starts depleting more and more and more. And then we end up getting more pissed off and more frustrated or more hurt or more disappointed, and end up kind of living in that physical and the emotional ickiness. Like I said, it might have been, maybe you want to, another response to stress is what they call tend and befriend, which means like if you see someone in stress, you want to say, hey, are you okay? Let's go talk over here. Do you want a cookie? How about a cup of coffee? So it's a way of a calming mechanism. But many people, we don't naturally do that, especially if we're feeling threatened or irritated or angry or frustrated at someone. We end up saying these types of words, which again, might help in some situations, but actually probably don't help you in this situation. So what do you do when you're faced with a difficult conversation, or maybe it's just a difficult interaction with the one parent on the side saying, hey, why are you late? Hey, you were supposed to pick up over 2 blocks away. Hey, why can't you just come and hang out a little while here, wait till my kid gets here? Or why'd you do that? It's a difficult interaction. And I want to pause and say, the vast majority of all of the tools and language I'm going to give to you, you can do in very quick ways. It does not need to be a long out conversation. It can actually be from the front of the bus out the door to the parents, or, to the extent possible, to the kids in the back. And I'm going to give you a little asterisk side thing that isn't on the slides. It's that one of the best ways to make connections with people is to learn their name. Nobody loves to hear their name more. People love to hear their own name. And actually, I know it's difficult, but it makes a connection. And also that if you're giving someone direct feedback, and if it's like, hey, look in the thing in the back of the bus, hey, Carol, I need for you to, the rule is you need to be sitting down. Hey, Carol, sit down. Hey, Jonathan, I need for you to keep your hands and arms inside the bus. All of those different things. And so it's not only knowing the name, but using the name immediately gets their attention. Same thing for the coworker, same thing for anybody else. It's a sense of well-being. And, I keep cheat sheets. So if you need to keep cheat sheets, sticky notes, put it on the back of your hand, whatever it is, it definitely helps. So, most people, want to have this conversation, or it's just easier to turn around and walk away. And if that's you, you are by no means alone. In fact, there was a study said that most people, like anywhere from 33 to 75%, they just want to avoid. They want to avoid the situation. They want to avoid the person. Oh, Paul's walking down the hall. I'm in there. I'm going to turn around and walk the other way. Or if we're in a meeting, like in the folks in the meeting room, if you're annoyed with them, you may sit on the furthest seat away. Maybe it's avoiding of, I'm going to stay on mute. I'm going to stay off camera. And that's my way of just avoiding the interaction. Not surprising. Yet one of the things that most every workplace has is in a policy of like, talk to the person, try to resolve it at the lowest level first. Then if you can't, then kind of go up and up and up, but going up and up and up may be a good tool. And it could also serve to escalate it, where those people think, oh my gosh, this must be a director level or a manager level or a supervisor level problem, rather than just kind of, hey, you just kind of ignored me, or I didn't take that right, or I was in a bad mood that day, or I was not focused, whatever it is. But people also just don't only avoid, they downplay it. So if someone asks you, how's it going? Fine. And if you're in the Bowser household and you know that fine comes out of my mouth, it is so far from fine. Not good. We tend to kind of, or minimize it. Maybe it's just really uncomfortable and someone comes up and like, maybe someone's like, hey, how's it going? And I'm going to do another little asterisk, and you say fine. And the asterisk is that generally if a lead, a manager or a supervisor, or maybe a union rep or a shop steward comes with you, that they may be doing it just as a greeting, because, you know, here in the US culture, we don't really want to know if it's fine or not. It's just, hey, how's it going? Fine. Okay, move on. It's used as a greeting most of the times, except usually people whose responsibility is to kind of check and see what the culture and the climate and how people are actually doing at work. They use that same language. And so depending on their position, they may be using it as a, hey, I am seriously checking in with you. How is it? So if you are a manager, a supervisor, a lead, or a director, maybe just after that, and he's like, fine, fine. It's like, no, really, how are things going? And then have that conversation, because if they come back and say, well, you said everything was fine and I took your word and things weren't fine, we kind of hampered people's ability to try to make improvements. Yet over 50% and up to 75% of people still do that. And then sometimes we just ignore and endure it. And it's like, maybe we have lost confidence or faith or hope, and we don't think it's going to be any different, or maybe it feels a little bit too risky to bring up. So a lot of people do this. Now, for those folks who are running the math, yes, this is more than 100%, because many people do more than one, and you may have one that you rely on more than others. So I don't know, for our drivers out there, if you just, don't make eye contact with the parents while they're trying to wave you down or something, like, no, I'm just looking ahead. Or maybe downplay it of like, how's it going? Oh, it's not going well with me, bus driver. Oh, okay, thanks so much. Bye-bye. Downplaying it. Or maybe you're just like, ignore it and endure it, of like, okay, I'm just here to be a receptacle for whatever bad stuff is going on in their life. But the other thing too is, and look at the percentage on this, 50 to 70%, people talk to friends and family. We find a trusted confidant to vent with. So that's completely normal. And or what we may do, another little asterisk here is we may complain to someone. So I'm thinking of like some of the parents where things just aren't going right for them, or they don't understand why there is a route change, or why they can't have this special consideration, or they wanted you to do something different. What they will do is they'll call the office and they'll complain, which is a different way of talking to someone that's trusted. It's more kind of a reporting up to be able to get something to happen. So it's not exactly talking to friends and family, but it is kind of turning to someone who we trust or we think who has influence. I think we all do that. So let me just ask you all, and I'm not asking for a show of hands or punching in, but which one do you think is most prevalent at Clover Park? Like generally, if you were to look at the whole district and then maybe look at the transportation department, what do you think is the most prevalent thing when people are faced with a difficult conversation or a difficult interaction? I'm just going to give you a second. Okay. Then which one do you do? Like more often than not at work, which one or ones of these do you kind of lean on? I used to be a big avoider, not so much. I think I still talk to friends and family a bit, particularly if it gets really sticky and I want some kind of professional advice with colleagues. But then I also want someone who knows me well enough to be like, Carol, you're taking this a little bit too personally, or why is this hitting you so hard? Or they may say, well, Carol, I know this about you, and I think this is why this is hitting you, or other types of things. So again, it's completely natural. And sometimes at work, depending on how many of either minimizing or kind of great conversations we have, we might feel sad, tired, stressed. We might be isolated. We might be uncertain, but we might be optimistic. We might be grateful. We might be anxious. But there's also something else there. We have conversations. And I think ultimately at work, we want to be hopeful. There's always a little bit of hope that things will get better, that we'll get through this rough patch, that maybe the conversations will go better. Maybe we'll feel we're being heard, that maybe someone will just maybe get more caffeine or take a chill pill in the morning and be a little bit less confrontational. So all of that. So the question would be like, if everybody's hopeful and in some way, shape, or form, or at least possibly resigned, given your position with the service you provide, with your coworkers within the district, what expectations or hope do people put in you? And I do think that one of the expectations of doing the work of getting the kids to and from school safely, and providing a good working environment, those are big, 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 important things. And sometimes like the expectations might be really big. They might be really, really aspirational of like, yes, of course, we're going to get custom service and everyone is going to be cared for, and the service and the coworkers are going to be just like I hope them to be, the best. And then there's kind of the reality of that there's circumstances out of our control that are, we have a lot of cultural differences within the workforce. We have a lot of cultural differences, a lot of people who aren't experts in how you do your job, thinking they know how you're supposed to be doing your job. And so there's kind of the reality here, and that difference between those kind of high expectations or aspirational expectations, or maybe misinformed expectations, and the reality, that gap can cause what I affectionately refer to as bad juju, difficulty, frustration. And I will share with you something that a mentor of mine shared. I hope it's helpful. That the more expert you become in your job, the more you forget what other people don't know. And also, I think it's possible, in fact, I think it's probable that a lot of people who are the consumers of your services, the parents and the students, they may have no clue about what it takes. I mean, I think that they may be looking at old movies about, getting that everybody comes on the bus and hangs out, and that, you pick them up at the corner. They may have little or no knowledge or experience of what it takes to execute your job. And they may have misinformed expectations. So if you want to steal that, and saying like, well, they're just an idiot, they don't know what's happening, they're just this is just ridiculous, they're just a bunch of idiots. You could maybe reframe it even in your own mind of saying they may in fact be misinformed. And that's a nice way of doing it versus saying that they don't know what they're doing. It says, they may be misinformed. They may have unrealistic expectations, and they may not understand how the department actually functions to be able to deliver the services as consistently as you do when it's potentially a bit of whack-a-mole every morning. Now, I don't know about you guys, if you experienced this. I had personal experience with it yesterday. That rolled over semi-tractor trailer on I-5 on the Port of Tacoma Road. It created a nightmare of traffic, kind of up toward Tacoma, but also going out towards the Browns Point area where I am. I mean, there were backups upon backups, and the tangential routes were a nightmare. I mean, you guys are amazingly agile. You have to address things when there are late starts. You have to address things when there's police activity and roads, and then when folks are out sick, the work still needs to get done. And so you do an amazing amount of job, and people may still have unmet expectations or unrealistic expectations on how you do your job. And the impact of those unmet expectations, which, by the way, I think unmet expectations are present in every type of tension or conflict or disappointment or frustration in any type of relationship, whether it's the schedule or who's out or how people manage or what the parameters or the policies are. So one of the things that I would call out to you as a tip of start keeping that radar screen about what are my expectations about this situation? What are possibly the other people's expectations in this situation? And is there a clash? Are they internally inconsistent? When I was a mediator for the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, that organization that mediated allegations of harassment, discrimination, and retaliation in the workplace, I would always ask people, what was your expectation of how the employer was going to handle this? And we start talking about what the expectations are. So a reformat of that question is, well, what was your expectation of how the parent was going to do this? What was your expectation of how your colleague was going to do the situation? What was your expectation of, here we go, Paul, I'm throwing you under the bus again, how Paul or the leadership team was going to do that? And we can talk about what our expectation was, speaking it out loud and being able to say, is this realistic given the current situations? Is it not realistic? Is it something we need to be working toward? And especially for the drivers, are you seeing patterns of unmet expectations and unrealistic expectations or assumptions for the within other departments and or with the parents? So that might be something that the group can work on to kind of clarify expectations. So that way, hopefully we're not getting to those, you got to calm down situations. So I'm just going to give you a minute to process that. I want you to think about what was the most recent kind of escalated situation and what were potentially your unmet expectations and what were potentially the other person's. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to come up with something. Here's a hint for recognize unmet expectations. Phrases like, it's just common sense. Everybody knows. What, were you raised in a barn? Oh, yeah, we just don't do that here. Or, hey, why can't I just? When you hear language like that, that is communicating to you that they have an expectation or an assumption about how the work is supposed to be done or what their relationship or interaction is supposed to look like and sound like and feel like. So usually when there is an unmet expectation and people have one of those big reactions that we talked about, one of those pinball reaction, chances are they might feel that one of their core values is being threatened. I think all tension and conflict and frustration where people feel as though a core value of theirs might be threatened. And it might be like, hey, maybe you really value teamwork and someone is doing something or not doing something enough that threatens what you think as like a really good team or really good interactions. Parents might love their kids a whole lot and feel like that they have to really advocate for their kids. I'm going to pause here. With my work with a variety of organizations for people who have disabilities or kids that have exceptional needs, those parents feel like they have to, and most times they do, they have to fight and advocate and advocate and advocate and advocate ad nauseum. And sometimes they forget that when they're putting on their suit of armor to advocate and show their love for their kids, they forget to dial it down, that maybe this particular situation doesn't need that level of advocacy. And so I'll give you a couple of tips in just a while of how to be able to address that. It may be that people really love their family, and some of the choices that we have to make for getting the kids to school versus maybe not getting the kids to school on time and getting the work done that maybe we value providing for the family to make sure we've got a good job. Maybe that's more important. And maybe some of you have a real sense of duty and obligation, and you do things to support that. And maybe some of you just really admire honesty, and you want people to be really, really honest and not obfuscate or leave things out. And if the interactions or people believe that any of these things are being threatened or not supported in the way that they think it should, that's probably aggravation and frustration. And that's where the big deal of emotions come from. That's why we get really angry that one of these might be threatened or undermined. So maybe think about from yourself, maybe if someone is expressing a lot of dissatisfaction, that you're like, hey, I'm really good at my job, and I really don't need some random person who doesn't really know what it takes to do this job, how stressful it is within this organization, kind of telling me or giving me negative feedback, but that being said, we also want to make sure that we recognize, hey, they just likely have a different expectation about what it takes to do this job. And also, if you can listen for the word fairness, it's just not fair. That may mean that a person really believes that there's a specific way in which fairness is demonstrated. I've got at least 6 different, somewhat overlapping, some mutually exclusive definitions of fairness. And what one person, one parent, or one of your coworkers thinks is fair may not be what others think is fair, or how Clover Park School District defines fair, or how the union defines fair, or how the management defines fair. But if we're hearing things about fairness, it's like, oh, they have an unmet expectation and they have a value that things should be fair. So that's why they may be getting escalated. So this kind of comes down and like, Carol, yeah, that's all really good, but what can we do? Okay, here's kind of tactics specifically that I want you to think about. A couple of frameworks, and we're going to getting into language that you can use. In fact, shamelessly use them, adapt them. After today, you're going to be talking about this. It might be like, hey, it was good, it was bad, it was big waste of time. I don't know, whatever you're talking about it. But I would love for you to be able to say to each other, hey, what did I get out of this? What tool am I using? What tool did this inspire me to think about? Because all of this will, in fact, be a big stinking giant waste of time unless you all start talking about it, adapting it, using it, so that way, hopefully, it will ultimately make life a little bit better for you. And here's a preview. We're going to come back together in a couple of weeks, I think a month-ish, and we're going to do a little bit of a part 2. At the beginning of part 2, I'm going to ask you, what have you noticed? What have you used? What have you adapted? What have you stolen from other people that started making a little bit of a difference? And now, so what can you do? For any one of these interactions, and it may be in your car driving to work, it may be as you're getting the bus ready to be able to go on the first route, it may be after coming back from the first route, coming into the building, and you're going to have interactions with people. I want you to think about, just in general, like if I'm going to run into someone, like if I'm going to run into Tina or Angel, and I want to share information with them, at the end of the interaction, what do I want them to know? Maybe it's like, hey, I want him to know that it was a decent route. Hey, I want him to know, be on the lookout for this one parent. Maybe it's like, hey, well, this situation came up. As a result of the action, do you want them to do anything? Do you want them to follow up with you? Do you want them to talk to somebody else? Do you want them to think about something? What is it you want them to do? And the other thing is, how do you want them to feel? Remember I said we're kind of thinking and emotional beings? People are assessing you and the team and the culture at Clover Park based on those very, very small interactions. Parents and kids are, making judgments either helpful towards you or maybe not so helpful towards you based on how you make them feel. And I'll put this, we can definitely enforce rules and goals and guidelines in a way that isn't humiliating or minimizing at all. It can be very, very straightforward. But think about, how do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel protected, safe, cared for, seen? So think about that. It's my kind of, when I coach and train people, I'm saying, if you can set this up, you can think about this ahead of time. So that way you are well prepared for the interaction when it happens. Know, do, feel. Give it a shot when you walk through the door coming home. How do you want them to feel? So what are you going to do in support of making them feel that way? If you want them to do something, how concrete can you make your ask? If you want them to know something, how are you going to share your experience so that way they know and understand and appreciate why you're asking what you're asking for? Know, do, feel. Now, I also believe, aside from unmet expectations, that every human interaction has these 4 common characteristics. We've got goals, roles, guidelines, and ground rules. I'll say it again: goals, roles, guidelines, and ground rules a third time, not the final time for your auditory learners. Goals, roles, guidelines, and ground rules. When those are fuzzy, when they're consistently inconsistent, when they're internally inconsistent, or people have different ideas of what they are, that causes conflict and unmet expectations. So the ultimate goal may be getting kids to and from. You also may have a goal of, I don't want it to be a crap day. I want to feel good at the end of the day. Maybe the goal is I want to get through the day and have a nap. And then maybe something happens and you need to go and do something else. So therefore the nap is out the window. You may have different, roles. It's like, okay, as a driver, this is my role. This is my level of authority. And by the way, I have this much flexibility here doing this. And the kids on the bus, they have a certain role, but there's also guidelines, which is kind of the way that we do things around here, which is different from the ground rules. The ground rules are going to be like state of Washington laws, Clover Park district policies, the laws, for licensing within the state of Washington, maybe also some of the laws that govern disabilities and accommodations in the workplace. So all of those are present. And if people have a different view on what they are, their power to enforce or adapt those, then we start getting difficulty. But one of the things that you can do is, like, if you want to be able to say, hey, the guideline here is that, we have correct me, you guys would know if I'm wrong, but maybe we have a 10-minute window to be there to pick up the kids. And the guideline for the parents is you need to be there preceding that 10-minute window. So that way they're ready to board. And maybe the guideline is we are looking for, once we have the kids in, we can go, or if a kiddo isn't there, we have a little bit of a guideline to do it. But the ground rule is, if we have waited X number amount of times, we have to go. So being able to say, like, hey, maybe we have a different expectation of what the guidelines are. Well, I didn't know. Oh, okay. So you didn't know. So now this is the guideline. We've got a 20-minute, a 10 or 15-minute, window, whatever it is. Looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thanks so much. If you have any questions, talk to the office, because that's kind of part of their rule. I've got a guideline that I need to be on time for the next place. So we're not arguing what the guidelines are. We're not arguing what the roles are at all. We're just stating this is the goal, this is the role, this is the guideline, this is the ground rule that I'm operating under. And if you have any kind of questions talking through the bus door, that's going to be more than a quick interaction or a, hey, how's it going? Then that's time to call. And so that way there can be a better, more detailed conversation. Or if you have specific questions, you can call, and the team there will get your call. You may need to leave a message. I think the guideline is we give you a call back, and if the person doesn't know, may ask you some questions so that way they know who to guide you to. And working with the leadership team, I know that one of their guidelines is we're going to give you a warm handoff to someone that if I don't know, I will let you know who does it, and I'm going to try to give you a direct transfer to them. So it's a little bit of care and feeding and customer service, how you treat someone so that way they feel heard and respected. Yeah. So why is all this important? Remember that hopeful thing? If people are feeling hopeful, that pinball machine going where they can think and they can empathize and they can problem solve and not just vent. That's awesome. The other thing that I think kind of escalates situations is we always say, what can I do for you? And this may not be such a great thing while you're on the bus trying to drive. Because if you say, what can I do for you? You are actually implying that that in your role, you have the authority to grant them what they're asking for. And you may not. And what they're asking for may not be within the realm of possibility. It might be nice, but not within the realm of possibility. So you can say, what sort of help are you looking for? And if someone's seen really kind of angry or frustrated, they won't necessarily know what their ask is, but they can explain what they're frustrated with. And so you can really say, oh, it sounds like you need some clarity about the bus schedule, or it sounds like that there might be some confusion or miscommunication or misinformation about the guidelines. And you could say, I might be wrong, but this is how, I'm understanding the guidelines to be operating this way. However, what sort of help are you looking for? You can call the office, or I think that Paul is the person to be able to talk to you about that, or to be able to direct you to the right person. So everyone can have the right conversation with the right person. So let that sink in. Swap it for what sort of help are you looking for, and knowing that they may not know the exact help they're looking for, but they'll give you a little bit of hints and you can probably point them in the direction. And even saying like, no, I can't do that right now. Or you could say my focus right now is getting the kids to school. This is my focus. If you have, other concerns or questions, go ahead and give the office a call. I've already kind of hinted at this, is that human beings are storytellers. So we will talk about our experience through story to kind of illustrate a point. Who, what, where, when, why, big details. It may go back in time because they're saying that all of these various things are a pattern. So I'm kind of trying to listen for what's potentially important for this person. Is there a way that I can help? And that might just be directing them to the right person, or it could just be saying, hey, this is the guideline, this is the ground rule that we're operating under. And oftentimes they complain in the form of a story. If you get nothing else from today, I would like for you to get this. A complaint is nothing more than a request in disguise. The request may be poorly timed, poorly worded, very escalated. There might be blaming and shaming involved for you or for others. A complaint is nothing more than a request in disguise. So all of a sudden we're listening for, oh, there's a complaint. I wonder what the embedded request is. Now that allows you to kind of get some emotional distance from it. And when you hear it, you're like, that's a complaint. And if we can kind of maybe repeat back to them what their area of concern is, what they're having trouble with, what their expectation was, that really can help. Now, this might be less, more for the interactions, within the district than so much with the parents. But I listen for the rule of three. I said, I had my 4 up, but the rule of 3. And it is this, because if you hear it once, like, okay, I hear it once, I'm listening for unmet expectations about goals, roles, guidelines, ground rules. Is it really escalated? What's happening? How am I feeling this in my body? So maybe I hear it once and I'm like, oh, okay. But if I hear it twice, I kind of think, hey, I think I've heard this before. Now, a couple of people, you're really busy, they're really busy, they forget that they have told you this story before, or they just are a bit of a raconteur and like telling this particular story. So like heard it once, heard it twice, okay. But if I've heard it 3 times, that's my clue to stop. Because if people are saying it repeatedly, it means that they do not feel heard and their complaint is not getting addressed. Now, you may be the friends or family or trusted advisor, so they're talking to you versus having the conversation to get some degree of resolution with the person or persons they need to be talking to. So that power of 3 might be like, oh, one thing you could say, I've heard you say this some different times. We've heard about it. We've listened to it. I've kind of directed it to you. You know, what's going on? Or I've heard it, I've seen it, what have you done to be able to, have you had a conversation talking about goals and roles and guidelines and kind of what your expectations are with that person? Have you guys had a conversation about this? But it just really means that they're not feeling heard. And if people don't feel heard, they will talk to more people in more modalities and go up more different chains more loudly to be heard, which then escalates it. And then we start getting really kind of frustrated of, oh my gosh, they're complaining so much, you know, or things aren't getting addressed. Now, you may try to have a conversation with people and it goes poorly. Maybe they say something that just ticks you off. Or you're like, I've had enough of this, I'm shutting down. And it might be that that when we talked about bully, it means that they're trying to be really assertive to get their point across, or maybe to get you to agree or capitulate. But it may just be that they just don't feel heard. Or it may be that they're trying to exercise what power they think they have. And it may be that you're a receptive audience. Or it may be that, you know, they've been relying on a tool that's really well used, but maybe not really effective. So we learn behaviors that we feel are successful or make us feel as though we have some control or agency in our lives. And one of the things about bullies, they tended to be bullies. They tended to be victims. They tend to felt victimized and powerless and helpless and hopeless. And unfortunately, a lot of people who were bullied end up mimicking those behaviors to be able to get a sense of power. Now, I'm going to date myself a little bit. Do you guys remember, it's like 80s, maybe early 90s, they had this experiment where they took kids who were kind of had really bad behavior problems and like truancy and different things like this, and juvenile offenses, and they took them into prisons and then had the prisoners yell at them and say, this is where you're going to end up, you know, and the kids were terrified, you know, big eyes. A huge percentage of those kids ended up committing crimes as adults, because if people are acting out and bullying because they feel helpless and hopeless and victimized and powerless, they turn around and using those behaviors. So maybe it's a little bit of going like, what do you want people to know? What do you want them to do? How do you want them to feel, you know, in the workplace? Maybe just think about that. And maybe the tool that you are using isn't particularly helpful, that maybe creating a reputation you don't want, and maybe having people, you know, avoid you, minimize you. And that's not necessarily what you want to do. However, it can all be in the recovery. You can say, hey, I'd like to be able to try that interaction again, but before I do, I want to make sure I understand what's important to you. And these are more kind of colleague to colleague, boss to subordinate, subordinate to boss type of conversation. So that way you're getting it, like, I see you, I get you, I think I'm going to try to take a shot at what I think is important to you, and talking about that way. And you will find that that kind of decreases people's pinball response. Or you can do what we do in the Bowser household. Hey, that didn't go well. Can I get a do-over? Which means I'm going to, try to have the conversation again, recognizing that it didn't go well and I'm making the attempt. And one of the great things you can do to kind of lessen people, you say, you make a good point. My husband does this to me, with me, where it's like I'm getting agitated and he says, hey, you make a good point. And I can literally feel my shoulders relax. And all of a sudden I'm more receptive. I'm less confrontational. So therefore he's not confrontational. We don't have that ever escalating, who's the biggest bear in the room. And we do it in front of our son. And he started doing this ever since he was about 9 or 10. You make a good point. You're not conceding anything. You're acknowledging that you actually say that is a good point. It may not be the number one point for you. However, it's all of a sudden you're getting people less defensive. So if someone is complaining about that, well, the pick was here yesterday and it's there today, or the regular driver does this, you could say, hey, you make a good point. Consistency and predictability are really important. I get it. So if they're complaining of this, that, the other, they're saying, hey, it's inconsistent and I find this frustrating. Hey, consistency is important. Well, here's the number, or, hey, when we do this route, this is consistently, where we are scheduled to be at this time range. So that way, and if there are other needs or things that we need to be aware of, again, kind of, reach out to the office. You make a good point. Now, you may say, Carol, but complete. And we have heard that so many times in our lives that when we hear the but, we just go, Farfig-Nugan. We know that something's coming after it, that we feel minimizing, placating of they're just going to talk about what's important to them and not acknowledge what I have said at all, or completely minimize it. Well, then that doesn't really help us, does it? So what we want to do is substitute something. You don't want to be a buddy. You want to be a Yeti. Because yet balances all of those competing needs and roles. So what's one? I'm trying to think of one off the top of my head. I'm thinking about, it might be something along the lines, oh, I've got it. It might be something like, hey, Carol, we've got a couple of the kids, who just act really inappropriately on the bus. They are disruptive. It creates a safety issue, but nobody's doing anything about it. Well, the other side is we've got kids who are acting inappropriately, yet there may be behavioral and emotional things where there are accommodation issues going on, yet we have to try to figure out how to meet the needs of safety and predictability and a good work environment for you, yet we still have to comply with state and federal law about accommodation plans and what may indeed be accommodation issues for particular kids. So it's like, okay, well then how do we end up getting each met to some level that is minimally or maybe more than minimally acceptable yet? So don't be a buddy, be a Yeti. And one thing is you may never be 100% completely comfortable with these conversations. It might be physical factors like you aren't well caffeinated. Yeah. You may be sleep deprived. You maybe have a lot of stressors in your life. You may be frustrated or disappointed or just angry about other things that are going on, which means that you are already escalated and you are maybe going to be more assertive and perceived as aggressive or disruptive or not respectful to others. And then we're going to get a complaint. Or it might just be an uncomfortable conversation given the topic. And, that's okay. I do this stuff like this for a living and I still get nervous. I don't go, I kind of go, yay, conflict, something important's going on, versus boo arguments. People are in the, sucking vortex of pissed off. What I want to get to people is even if I don't do a good job, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can still do it. And it's okay if you're nervous or uncomfortable. It just means that it's that stress response that your body or spirit or your psyche recognize that there's something important is going on and there might be something important at stake. But completely avoiding or minimizing the conversation, that's not okay, because then you are ignoring and enduring and you're living in points of pain, and people don't want that either. So what did you get out of today? Did you write something down? When you talk about this, what is it that you're going to say? What is it you got out of it? Is there something you hope that we covered that we didn't? Well, you can find me online. You can shoot me an email. We're going to get back together on April 19th and do a little bit more about tips, tools, and things like that. And if you want to follow me on LinkedIn, if you're a LinkedIn person or a Facebook person, I post content there to help people give more tools, more insights, more resources to use in their personal and professional lives. Or if you want to get a conflict tip of the day to your phone to be able to share with friends, families, or supervisors, you can just get that QR code and sign up for it. I have fun putting them out. And a lot of people say it's an easy way to start having conversations about goals, roles, guidelines, ground rules, expectations, and how we actually handle things here and how we would prefer to handle things here. So that being said, I'm going to hand it back to Paul. Paul, closing comments, thoughts, ideas, shout outs. And also, I think people would like to hear what actually resonated with you and what resonated with you and what types of things has the leadership team started to be putting to use.
I just wanted to double check. There was the chat that says, how do you suggest dealing with downright bully drivers? And did we deal with that, Kelly? I think that was. And if not, Carol wants to be on a little bit longer and she'll answer questions and whatever. You know, we went through this training, I want to say right at the beginning of the school year, where and we've had multiple sessions as staff already, and dealing with parents because they do call, you know, and just taking that step back, looking for the real meaning behind what they're saying and trying to figure that out. And I think the staff has really gotten to where we've diffused a lot more parents this year than we have in the past, and that's really been helpful for us. Believe it or not, we do it with some of you drivers because sometimes you could come in pretty escalated too, and we definitely understand that with student behaviors on your buses. But really, it was about getting more tools in your pockets for you to use, not only on your bus but in life. And so so thank you everybody for being here, for being respectful and listening. If you want to, now's your time to unmute to ask questions. Your questions will also kind of lead Carol into our next session, possibly on how she wants to take it. So now's that time.
Great. And you can stop the recording. And there we go. And while you're stopping the recording, I'll say my recollection was that for the leadership team, the staff, the three things